A warning before we begin. This series contains reference to sexual abuse.
This is Radio Dublin on 253 metres medium wave and time band time check now is 1:32, 2 minutes after 1:30.
It was the most extraordinary broadcast I think I've ever heard.
Well, a scandal, rumour, or take it what way you will, was dug up from somewhere or other. I was not here, so I could not refute it.
For a week, Radio Dublin had disappeared from my dial.
I was in Spain, and anyone wishing to close the station couldn't have picked a better opportunity.
Outside of a handful of people, no one really knew what was going on.
The allegations, of course, are the type of allegations which people cannot disprove.
But on Sunday, the 16th of April, 1978, the station was back when Eamon Cooke returned from holidays and took to the airwaves.
They can deny them, certainly. They can deny them, like myself, until I am blue in the face. But, as everyone out there will say, well, there's no smoke without a little bit of fire.
I pointed my transistor at the Dublin mountains and pressed play and record. In my wildest dreams, I could never have anticipated what I heard next.
Yes, they were the allegations laid down against me personally, that children were allowed into this radio station here and were indecently molested. That was the actual allegation.
Live on air, Eamon Cooke had just announced he'd been accused of molesting children.
All I could do, of course, was deny it and ask for proof.
I expected that was the end of Radio Dublin. What happened next surprised me even more. I'm Peter Mulryan from RTE Documentary on One. This is Pirate Predator. Episode 3, Mutiny. To understand exactly what Eamon Cooke was up to with that broadcast and what was at stake, we need to go back a little over 3 months before Cooke's infamous broadcast to the start of 1978.
OK, 15 minutes after the hour of 11 o'clock, and don't forget, about 12 midnight, we will be bringing in the new year, Radio Dublin on 253. That's, of course, the 1st of January, 1978.
In the late 70s, pirate radio in Dublin had completely taken over the airwaves. Think TikTok crossed with Instagram, served up with a wedge of Spotify. Pirate radio was all that and more.
And, of course, the Lord Mayor himself of Dublin will be speaking to you, our Radio Dublin listeners. Right now, more music.
The station was now broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Everything in Eamon Cooke's life now revolved around Radio Dublin. But truth be told, as long as no one swore on air, he had little interest in what was broadcast. He left all that to a remarkably talented bunch of disc jockeys.
I was slightly older than all the other DJs. I was 26.
This is James Dillon, at the time a DJ in Radio Dublin.
Some of them were as young as 18, some 22 or 3, but I was the old guy. Now, I suppose Eamon Cooke should have been the adult in the room, but he was always a strange individual.
And we'll be giving you the 1978 schedule a little later on this show. Stand by.
Eamon Cooke, I guess, was almost a caricature of a dirty old man. He wore the same suit all the time. It was shiny at this stage, particularly around the knees and elbows and stuff. And then he smoked continuously. But when he smoked, he sat back in the chair and the ash fell all over him.
Many, many thanks to James Dillon, the captain, Mike Eastwood.
The other adult in the room was station manager DJ John Paul.
I was delighted to be joining a radio station, whether it was a pirate radio station or not, and I enjoyed every moment of it in terms of broadcasting.
Most of the DJs back then created an on-air name and never used their full name in case the station was raided. Today, DJ John Paul has asked us not to reveal his full name.
I did not like Eamon Cooke because I didn't trust him. There was just something about him. I just could not put my finger on it.
Back in early 1978, in Radio Dublin, DJ John Paul's job was to schedule the other disc jockeys and basically keep the station on air.
He was definitely a control freak. Eamon controlled everything. If you gave Eamon an idea, as long as he could take that idea and say it was his, he would be happy. But if you tried to change anything, he would react very differently.
Eamon Cooke, by now nicknamed The Captain, acted every bit of that title.
He was just interested in having that radio station running 24/7. I mean, the guy was crazy. He was going up and down poles. In the middle of winter, he would get pneumonia, he would get very bad colds, very bad flus, and he would be ill quite a lot, especially when he was trying to organise his aerials on the roofs and stuff like that.
Well, Radio Dublin are again looking for staff, this time to man one of Ireland's busiest telephone lines.
Because Radio Dublin was so popular, the other thing that the station needed was people to answer the phones and take requests.
So if you've got nothing to do one evening per week, well, perhaps you'd like to help us then by becoming a Radio Dublin telephonist one day a week.
Because in them days we didn't have computers or anything like that. It all had to be done by handwriting. And so the girls would bring in the requests to us and we would, of course, read them out on the radio.
Votes are going out for Joseph Butler, and this one is coming in from all your friends. And a nice selection of music here on 253. Hope you're enjoying yourselves right now.
Most of these telephonists were usually young and usually female, as DJ John Paul remembers.
It didn't feel right sometimes, you know. The girls would be there late in the evening and Eamon Cooke would be there, and I remember on one occasion I walked into the back room and Eamon Cooke had one of these girls on his lap. I found it very strange. I thought, you know, it wasn't right. But I dismissed it and thought, oh, he's just been friendly and, you know, whatever.
But for other listeners like Trish Malone, Radio Dublin and the other pirates were the coolest thing this side of a wibbly-wobbly wonder.
I was slightly obsessed with the pirate radios when I was 14 and 15.
Trish Malone was so obsessed, she would scan the daily newspapers, cutting out and keeping anything to do with the pirates.
I actually visited Radio Dublin on several occasions. I had a crush on one of the DJs.
Who was that? You can tell us now.
James Dillon was his name.
James Dillon. Wait till I tell him.
He played Sweet 16 for me on the radio. On my 16th birthday, the highlight of my year.
You brought with you something you don't see anymore, which is a scrapbook. It's fantastic.
Yeah, so they're all from 1978, 1979.
It's kind of like a contemporaneous rolling history of Radio Dublin.
Yeah, and I suppose modern kids looking at this would scratch their heads, but I used to troll through the newspapers, the Evening Press, the Herald, and anything that was anything to do with the station for a year or two I used to cut out. It is quite interesting. People took to the streets to support it. There's a letter to the press that compares the people who ran pirate radios to fascists and communists, so it's
time to end RTE's monopoly, it says here. RTE producers fear skimpy pop radio, whatever that is.
The Irish Press, Wednesday, January 18th, 1978. Silenced pirate station crackles back. Dublin's main pirate radio stations went off the air last night following a raid by Gardaí and post office officials.
On Tuesday, the 17th of January, 1978, a Bee Gees record had just been put on when Gardaí burst through the door of Eamon Cooke's home.
Radio Dublin was put out of commission when about 8 post office engineers and Gardaí burst into a terraced house in Inchicore and removed its equipment.
Eamon Cooke described to journalists what happened.
They broke down 2 doors searching for our transmitter. Door and windows were broken, and they refused to show us the search warrant until they had searched the house.
Cooke locked 2 of the doors in the house from the inside, and Gardaí didn't manage to find the transmitter.
Even if they did find it, we would not be stopped. We've had offers of support and equipment from callers all over the city.
As post office engineers removed the equipment, children from the area chanted, "Up with Radio Dublin, down with RTE."
This must have been a difficult time for Eamon Cooke's wife, Joan. Between Garda raids and a radio station operating out of her house, she was now a stranger in her own home.
I met Joan. Joan was a lovely woman, a really lovely woman.
This is DJ Dave Moore, who worked at Radio Dublin in the late 70s and into the early 80s.
I think she got a bit upset about, like, her house was now sort of like O'Connell Street, you know, like there was people coming at all hours of the night. Joan was the second wife. I think she did suffer from her mental health. I wouldn't blame her because it was so tough there, you know, it really was. And Joan would look absolutely fabulous one day and she would be in the horrors the next day, and she was a very nice woman, but I think being married to him was a difficult one, you know.
Radio Dublin continued to broadcast 24/7 from the downstairs studios at Eamon Cooke's house on Sarsfield Road. But for Siobhan and Anne, who you met in our previous episode, they knew of a much darker reality upstairs, and they knew they weren't the only children being brought there.
The process of grooming and the steps along the way, and ultimately culminating in him taking children to bed naked and penetrating, that culminated in, for instance, carrying Siobhan and I in both arms naked into his bedroom.
You could have one of the DJs on air, the telephonists are on the phone, and if you happen to go in or your friend happened to go in, he'd say, "I have to show you something upstairs." They weren't aware. Well, they knew we were there, but they weren't aware what was actually happening.
By now, Siobhan was going on 11 years old, still visiting Radio Dublin and still being abused by Eamon Cooke.
And I remember thinking, because my grandmother had died, and we believed that, you know, when people die and they go to heaven and they watch it.
She was beginning to realise how wrong everything was.
And I remember feeling, if my granny's looking down from heaven now and she says, this doesn't feel right, and I wouldn't like this for my granny to be looking at me in heaven. So that was a really pivotal point for me to, no, I don't want this.
Cooke must have felt Siobhan coming of age and pushing back, because he came up with another method to keep children like Siobhan and Anne coming back into his bedroom.
He did try to blackmail with photographs. So he had taken pictures of children in their underwear, and he had threatened to put those pictures on his car, you know, under the window wipers, and park his car outside some children's houses that their parents could see the pictures if they didn't go back in. And he'd be terrified if he saw his car parked somewhere, because in our minds we were saying, oh, would there be any pictures on the windscreen? But it was a threat.
Like Siobhan, Anne remembers those threats too, as a 10 and 11-year-old.
He used the cine camera as a method of to induce fear too. He would record our family members as they walked down the street, show us them, and threaten. You know.
He's letting you know, I know.
I see everything.
I see everything.
But even blackmail wasn't enough to keep Siobhan going back to Cooke's bedroom. There was one incident that changed everything in early 1978.
And I was on my own in the house that day, and we went up to the bedroom. But before we went to the bedroom, like, there'd be biscuits and cakes and all sorts of things, and he gave me a banana. And I remember eating the banana. And then I went up to the bedroom, and as we normally did, I was in the bed. I woke up in that bed, but I had no recollection of falling asleep. And I would not have an iota what being drugged meant, but I was sore at the back. And I remember saying, how did I fall asleep here? And I've never fallen asleep in any other bed than my own bed. And I remember going home and saying, I'm not going back down there again. And I remember getting soap in the bath and scrubbing myself, and that's the first time I ever done that.
It appears Cooke was now drugging children to abuse them, while at the same time his public profile grew. Around the time of this incident with Siobhan, Cooke was giving interviews to the press off the back of the raids on Radio Dublin by the authorities.
So I've been looking through the newspaper archive to see what there is on Cooke.
This is one of our producers, Shauna.
Yeah, I've come across a few interesting articles. One from the 5th of February 1978.
Excellent. This is a really important window, early 78.
Yeah, and he's, as usual, preoccupied with getting this licence for Radio Dublin.
Yeah.
And he is quoted in the article as saying,
let's all sit down and talk about it. Look at that box over there.
He's pointing to a banana box filled to the gills with paper, with signatures, thousands upon thousands of signatures supporting the Radio Dublin cause.
Right. It says fool's cap pages.
Last time we counted the signatures on those petition sheets, there were 100,000 people's names in that box. Each one of them encouraging us in our bid for a licence.
This is actually probably true. I remember the call out for support, free radio marches, signatures to save Radio Dublin. So, yeah, I remember this really, really well. It was huge at the time. If you were young and in Dublin, you knew about this.
So it feels on the one hand he's running this huge underground station, but he's also very much mixing in the mainstream as well. And he's quite brazen about it, because there's also another article from March 1978 reporting on a massive charity walk happening in Dublin, led by the Lord Mayor at the time. And not only is Cooke present at this, he's comparing the event.
So it's amazing.
Yeah, he's really front and centre.
You can see, how he's leading this double life. I mean, on one hand, we now know what was happening behind closed doors. The man's was a paedophile. On the other hand, he's on stage in the middle of Dublin. He's leading charity marches and he's doing free radio marches and appeals. It's like a double life. He's becoming a celebrity.
Completely. And then, the reports around him are just like he's this colourful, offbeat character, but there's no sense of danger surrounding him at all. So he was hiding in plain sight, essentially.
As Radio Dublin grew in popularity, so too did Cooke's public profile, with his criminal past being totally overlooked or hidden. The first public inkling that Cooke had a dark and sinister side was going to happen when Siobhan had an encounter with Cooke that would lead to a grenade going off in Radio Dublin.
He had a back room on the landing that was locked, and he had an awful lot of equipment in there. And behind some of the televisions, he took out pictures like a calendar. Like back in the day, topless women would have been, huge. Definitely back then, I'd never seen a woman, her breasts exposed. And he said, someday, you'll look like that too. Well, I wasn't on my own, I was with my friend, and we just went, that's a bit strange. But we just laughed it off and went on about our business.
It's this conversation that was about to spark a mutiny at Radio Dublin.
In the radio station, something came about a bare-breasted woman, and I innocently said to one of the telephonists, I know where there's loads of pictures of them. And she said, what? And I said, yes. I said, they're upstairs in the back room. And can you show us? And I said, but the place is locked.
The Radio Dublin telephonist who spoke with Siobhan was actually a 13-year-old teenager herself. But after chatting further, she strongly suspected Eamon Cooke was abusing Siobhan. For James Dillon, one of the more senior DJs, this was not what he or what anyone wanted to hear.
Up to that moment, my life couldn't have been better. I was selling ads I didn't even have to sell them. I just had to ring people and say, do you want to advertise again tomorrow? And then I'm getting half the money.
Slow down.
Happy days. I was on the air.
Down we go with John Miles.
For a 2-hour slot, 5 days a week.
Doesn't time fly? Here we go.
That was the deal. DJs worked for free, but kept half the money from any advertising they brought to Radio Dublin.
Buy a 10-day freezer pack or a 3-week freezer pack, 3.5 pounds of roast rib beef, 3.5 pounds of roast pork, 4.5 pounds of roast lamb.
At the time, James was clearing £300 a week, which meant Eamon Cooke was getting another £300. That's about €2,000 in today's money. And that was from one show and from one DJ. So Eamon Cooke was cleaning up. Radio Dublin gave him exactly what he'd wanted all along: power and money.
I was at the happiest time of my life, making a lot of money.
James Dillon.
Doing something I really enjoyed. And then I was gigging in the nightclubs for the rest of the week. It was in one of those nightclubs. One of the guys that was involved in sales came in and said, I hear that Eamon Cooke is fiddling with the children. I said, that's a dreadful thing to say. But I said, either you're finished for saying something like that, or the radio station is finished if it's true. And I said, how do you know? Where did this come from? Who's the source? And he said, this 13-year-old girl. Whatever Siobhan said convinced the 13-year-old that there was sexual contact.
As survivors will often tell you, proving sexual abuse can sometimes be very difficult, more so when it involves minors. But James had an idea and went back to the teenage telephonist with a plan.
Give her a tape recorder, show her how to use it, and talk to Siobhan. Don't put any words in her mouth. Just say, do you remember what we were talking about the other day? I just have a few little questions for you around that. Tell me again what you were saying.
And so the girl approached Siobhan and recorded her.
Oh, James wants to know, would you like to do an interview, like on the radio? And I went, really? And she said, yes, but it'll be just me and another 2 people there. And it wasn't in my house, and it wasn't in Radio Dublin. And they were just asking me, anything strange ever happened in the radio station? I can't remember everything I said, but one thing that I always remember, they asked me to describe his bodily part, penis. And my answer was, it's like a banana. That's how innocent I was to describe an erect penis. It's like a banana. And it just pops out of his trousers.
The teenage telephonist brought the tape back to James, who couldn't believe what Siobhan was saying.
He took a picture with his camera, and the picture comes out of the camera. He showed it to me, and I was in my underwear. And he said, would your mammy be happy if she saw this picture? Because I'll put it on the dashboard of my car. And when she's walking home, she'll see it, and they'll know you were in here like that. And I want you not to talk to anybody. Don't tell anybody. I just knew at that second, this is an adult manipulating a child. I don't know what he did, but he didn't go to those lengths for nothing. And from that moment, I definitely believed that he was a paedophile and that he had been interfering with the children.
James Dillon knew Cooke's reputation for violence, so needed to plan his next step carefully.
The next step was to decide how best to deal with this, given the fact that Eamon Cooke was dangerous.
When you say dangerous?
He was quite threatening. He cut down the aerials of the competitors, always making himself out to be quite sinister, which he actually was. So I felt if I go straight to him, he's going to deny it.
As luck would have it, an opportunity presented itself. Radio Dublin was hosting a huge giveaway holiday, and the prize was a trip to Spain.
An offer came along of a holiday in a competition, and the winner of the competition was a 15-year-old girl who seemingly Eamon Cooke knew before. the competition was run.
Eamon Cooke did know the 15-year-old girl. She was a Radio Dublin telephonist, already a victim of Cooke's when he engineered this holiday to Spain, joined by another couple he knew. Cooke was now 41 years old and probably appeared to strangers as the young girl's father. But when Cooke went on that holiday, any doubt in James's head disappeared. He knew what he had to do, and he only had a week in which to do it.
It got him out of the radio station. So I called a group meeting of all the DJs. I told them what I believed. I told them I had a tape.
There were rumours going around that there was something wrong.
Station manager, DJ John Paul.
James told me that this week would be the end of Radio Dublin as far as he was concerned. He told me that there were allegations of some kind of sexual abuse with young girls.
James decided to set up a new radio station.
I'm putting my hand up and saying, I'm going. If anybody wants to come with me, it's up to you guys. It turned out that every single person that was in the room decided to leave.
The meeting sent a shockwave through the station. But in the days before mobile phones, Cooke had no way of knowing what was happening in his absence. At the same time, James decided the audio tape they had recorded had to get to Siobhan's mother, and it would be delivered by a trusted intermediary.
We figured, talk to the local priest. So one of the guys who worked in the station volunteered to bring the tape to the priest and told him we are leaving the station and that we believed that Eamon Cooke had touched Siobhan.
Station manager John Paul had his own need to know the truth. If you remember in the last episode, Siobhan spoke about the home movie Cooke had made of her and her friends doing the can-can in the garden.
I decided to do my own little investigation, and I went upstairs into a room and I noticed there was one of these cameras for filming. I looked at the footage with some other people and I noticed that all of the filming was with children in a garden. I think it was his back garden. I saw children from the legs up, to the waist. I couldn't see any of the children's faces. After seeing the footage, I absolutely was convinced that it was, in fact, sexual abuse. It upset me a great deal, and I knew there was a problem, and I didn't want to be a part of anything like this.
On the Sunday, Eamon Cooke and his party flew back to Dublin Airport.
Cooke arrived home from the holiday with his suntan, and myself and Jerry Campbell met him at the airport. So I told him that most of the staff had left the station, that I believed, and the other DJs believed that he'd been interfering with the children that were coming in, and based on that we weren't prepared to work for him anymore.
What did he say?
Well, that's interesting. He said, is the transmitter still working?
That's all he said?
Yeah. And then went off like a madman.
DJ John Paul was still at the station.
Eamon Cooke walked in and he just simply turned to me and said, John, at least you're here. I handed him the keys and I said, I'm sorry, Eamon, but I'm out. I am gone. I will not be coming back. Well, he said, we'll talk about that.
Eamon Cooke then went on the offensive. He contacted the press, and next morning, he was front page news.
2 newspaper cuttings. The first one here is from the Irish Press, Monday, 10th April 1978. Now, this is the day after Eamon Cooke's return from Spain. And this is the lead story. There's a huge picture of Cooke, and the headline is Staff Mutiny in Radio Dublin. The article goes on to say, that's Cooke of course, he said last night that allegations had been made about his personal conduct. And then he's quoted saying, nobody even approached me about these allegations. which of course he denied. Evening Herald, same day. And this is James Dillon, who's now behind 3 heavy steel doors. The breakup was due to irreconcilable differences, it says here. That's a quote. And then it goes on to say that certain facts had come to light in recent weeks, and that, again, quote, there had been no option but to leave Radio Dublin. The press blitz had successfully put James Dillon on the back foot, and Cooke took to the airwaves, promising to reveal the truth.
And of course it's news time, as I'm sure most of you will know out there. We've got some exciting happenings in the past fortnight.
This is the broadcast you heard at the beginning of this episode. Cooke's on-air monologue was to be a passive-aggressive masterclass mixed with fake news.
There is information from a number of people that yes, a tape recording was manufactured in this station here, and that 2 of our telephonists were paid to make that tape.
Eamon Cooke rambled live on air for about 2 hours straight, distorting the truth and playing the victim.
Malicious. Again, I repeat them. The allegations are that there was child molesting happening within Radio Dublin sometime within the past. Now, if you believe that there is one grain of truth in that, keep away from Radio Dublin, please, for your own sake. Just keep away from this station. That appeal goes out also to mothers.
Join us in episode 4 as we hear about the fallout to Siobhan's allegations.
None of my friends had played with me, and nobody had talked to the family, and it's a child's word over an adult's word.
And the predator, it seemed, simply would not stop.
You know, he'd be creeping around the house. I mean, there was one particular day that I mistakenly opened the door upstairs beside the toilet, and he was in there, and he was on top of a young girl.
If you know anything about Eamon Cooke, please contact us in confidence at documentaries@rte.ie, or you can leave an anonymous tip on rte.ie/Pirate Predator. If you've been affected by any issues raised in this episode, please visit rte.ie/helplines. Pirate Predator is narrated by me, Peter Mulryan. The series is produced by myself,
together with me, Nicoline Greer,
and me, Shauna McGreevy,
and me, Liam O'Brien.
The music is composed and performed by me, Alma Kelliher, with Ste Carolan on guitars.
And sound design is by me, Damian Chennells.
Readings in this episode were by Patrick Dunn and Shane Hartney. Your support will really help other listeners discover Pirate Predator. So please consider telling your friends about the series, share it on your social media, or leave a positive comment or rating wherever you listen. Until next time, thanks for listening.